There's a quiet assumption you may be living with. Most people live with this. And this assumption is that your memory is a recording of what happened. When you remember something painful, you believe that you're touching on the truth of what actually happened, that the emotion you're now feeling is the evidence of what went on. But that assumption, it could be costing you, it could be costing others years of peace, of clarity, and of self-trust. Because here's what almost no one understands properly, is because you do not remember the event. No, what you're remembering is the last time you remembered that event. And so each time you revisit it, you don't just recall it, you actually edit it emotionally. And do you ever notice that when you go back, when you think about something that happened, a moment, you can strengthen certain feelings. You can start to say, feel more hatred, feel more nervousness, feel happier. And then other emotions, you blur them. You add meaning to things that weren't there at the initial time. And what you then do is you start to live from that version in your memory as if it's a fact. This episode isn't about nostalgia, it isn't about trauma dumping, it isn't about healing your past, it's about exposing how rehearsed emotional memory actually quietly runs your present life and how you've been obeying something that isn't even real anymore. Welcome back to Master Your Mindset, Master Your Life. I'm Sanj and I'm here to help you on your journey, to help you wake up every day with purpose, feeling positive, feeling proactive, ready to get out of where you are now into a life, one which you dream, one which you desire, and one which you deserve. If you get something from this episode, please leave me a rating or review. Let me know your biggest takeaways. Share it with someone who you know who would benefit from hearing this. So, as I was saying, today's episode is not about nostalgia. It's not about thinking about things that have happened. It's about actually realizing that when you remember an event, you're not remembering it as it happened, how it actually went. So let's get grounded before we start moving elsewhere. Your memory is not stored like a video file. It isn't philosophy. This is neuroscience. When you recall a memory, the brain doesn't retrieve it. It reconstructs it. So what that means is each recall makes the memory malleable. So the emotional state that you're in now colors what you remember. Then what happens is your brain then resaves that memory with those emotional updates. Yeah, this process is known as memory reconsolidation. And it's well documented in cognitive neuroscience. And basically, what it means is every time you remember something, you are teaching your nervous system what that memory means to you now. So if you recall a memory of rejection while you're feeling ashamed today, what happens is your brain, it doesn't say, yes, an old event. No, what it does say is, this is relevant, this is current, save this feeling. It's like you going into a Word document, making a slight change, adding a full stop, taking away a comma, and just then resaving it. The next time that change, it shows up as that, the sentence doesn't quite make sense. So next time you remember it, the shame comes faster, it comes on stronger, it comes on more convincing. And eventually what happens is that feeling becomes the evidence. And it's not evidence because it's accurate. It's evidence because it feels familiar. And this is where a lot of people get confused. They'll say things like, I don't know why this still affects me, or it wasn't even that bad, but it just feels huge to me. Or maybe even just, I've worked on this already. Why is it still here? Here's why. Because nothing new is happening, but your emotional signal just keeps getting amplified. Think of it like this. The original event had a certain emotional weight. And then each recall, it adds another emotional layer, another emotional layer, another emotional layer. And just over time, those emotional layers add up. That memory becomes heavier than the actual event actually ever was. So you're no longer reacting to what happened. You're reacting to those years of emotional rehearsal, the repeated bodily stress responses. Yeah, you're actually reacting to a story that's been refined through self-protection. And your body doesn't know the difference between something happening and something vividly remembered. To your nervous system, no, the recollection is the experience. So this means that every time you revisit that moment without that awareness, you're retraining your body to live in that moment. So most people don't realize that they're not reacting to the present, that they're reacting to a stored emotional state. They're reacting to something triggered but they are triggered by something vaguely familiar. Yeah, they're reacting to just something that's justified after fact with logic. So what it can look like is it can look like snapping when something small happens, maybe shutting down when closeness is offered, maybe doubting yourself in those moments that require confidence. Something maybe you're withdrawing instead of speaking. How many people do you know who do that? Are you one of them? And then when the mind, it rushes in and it says, see, this is why I don't trust people, or this always happens, or this proves what I already knew. But the truth is, it's not proof. What that is it's pattern completion. Your nervous system is finishing a story that is practiced many times before. And the tragedy is this. Yeah, you think you're being cautious, you think you're being self-aware, you think you're learning from experience, but what you're actually doing is you're living inside a memory loop. So you're living the same moment over and over and over again. You're not doing anything different. Yeah, you're just noticing all these same things. You're noticing and you're linking these feelings together where there may be no connection, where there may actually not need to have such a big emotion, not such a big reaction. And if you don't interrupt this pattern, you will slowly lose trust in yourself, because over time, this pressure is going to build. Yeah, you're going to just start reacting emotionally. And then when you start reacting emotionally, you're going to find a way to justify it intellectually. Once you've done that, once you've started to justify it intellectually, you're going to start to promise yourself that you're going to be different next time. And then when the same thing happens again, you're not. You're the same person. You're not doing anything different. You're not changing the way you react. And it's not because you're weak. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not because you don't know that, or it's not because you are unaware. It's because the driver in you isn't conscious. You are aware of these changes. You are aware you need to be different. You are aware that these things need to stop happening. But the driver of you isn't conscious. And so by that I mean that you're just doing this out of reaction. You're doing it out of habit, out of routine. This is where your body becomes your mind, because what happens is it stores up all these emotions, and you're so used to these reactions. When X happens, then I react like Y. And then when that happens enough times, you start doing things without thinking. So when your driver is in charge, when you're not aware, when you're not conscious of what you're doing, when you let your subconscious mind, your automatic habits take hold, that's when you're going to find that you make the same mistake again and again. And eventually you will stop believing your own intentions. You'll start saying things like, oh, well, this is just how I am, or, well, I've always been like this, or something, maybe I know it's irrational, but, and that sentence, I know it's irrational, but, dot, 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 that is a sound of self-leadership slipping. Because that awareness without agency, it becomes resignation. So here's a reframe that you need to hear. The goal is not to relive the memory differently. The goal is to stop rehearsing it emotionally. You don't need to analyze it more. You don't need to explain it better. You don't need to talk about it again. What you need to do is you need to recognize when your body is responding to a rehearsal rather than a threat. And that moment right there, that moment is where the agency returns. That is when you actually start to pick up your mind, your body. You start to be in control again. Not by suppressing emotion, not by bypassing it, but by naming it accurately. This feeling is familiar, it's not current. This reaction belongs to repetition, not reality. When you start making those distinctions, they matter, because then it allows your body to calm faster when it knows that this is not happening now. This is something that has happened. This is not impacting my current situation. It is not impacting my present. And so here's a boundary that can change everything. You do not make decisions from rehearsed emotions, not conversations, not confrontations, not withdrawals, not self-judgments. If the emotion is strong and familiar, you pause. You pause, not to overthink, but to interrupt the loop. Take 3 seconds, because every time you act from that state, every time you act without interrupting that loop, you're reinforcing the memory again. And let's be honest, this isn't about perfection. It's about refusing to let your past keep voting in your present. Because if you let that happen, your present soon becomes your future, and you're soon going to be ending up with more regrets than results. So think about this. How much of your current personality is actually memory loyalty? How much of what you call intuition, caution, realism, just being honest, is really your nervous system defending a story that it's just rehearsed for years? What would change if you stopped confusing familiarity with the truth? Don't rush to resolve that. Just let it sit there for a minute. Be uncomfortable with it. Because clarity doesn't come from reassurance. It comes from precision. And this can be one of those moments where seeing clearly changes how you live, how you think, how you behave in the future, whether you like it or not. That's what I've got for you today. And you realize that some of what you've been reacting to in your life isn't even happening now. It's just old reruns which are just being replayed. If you do nothing with that awareness, the cost of it is simple. You just keep rehearsing, keep reacting, and you just keep losing trust in your own steadiness. But if you take action, if you start to call yourself out, if you start to become more self-aware, that's when you'll notice a change. That's where you can start becoming the person you really know you can. Version 2.0. I hope you got something from this. And if you did, please share it with someone who you know who would benefit from hearing this. My mission is to help as many people as possible, put as much positivity and help out there to see whose life I can impact in a positive way. If you are a man and you're looking for a group where you can be supported, held accountable, and be challenged on your version of becoming the next, on your journey to become the next version of yourself, join the Motivated Man on Facebook. Or if you're interested in having that accountability, being challenged and just being held accountable, then join Master Your Mindset, Master Your Life. I hope you got something from this. Thank you. And remember, when you start to break those unconscious patterns to restore your self-leadership, when you start to do that, you start to master yourself. When you start to master yourself, you can master your mindset, so you can master your life.